Kia ora everyone, it's Hannah here. I just had a little fun announcement. I really appreciate all of the kind comments and feedback I've been getting on the episode, so I just wanted to say thank you for all the support so far. I will be creating a YouTube channel and updating and adding each of the existing podcast episodes, so we'll be able to integrate the written transcripts of the interviews better, and so people that don't have access to Spotify can still watch the episodes. Cool, that's all. Welcome to Seeing Me on the Screen. I'm your host, Hannah, and each week I am honoured to engage in meaningful conversations with an incredible lineup of guests. From disability rights advocates to artists, filmmakers to everyday heroes, our guests bring a wealth of diverse perspectives that enrich our discussions. Their stories and insights are invaluable as we analyse and uncover the narratives surrounding female disability in mass media. Your voice matters. Email us at seeingmeonthescreenpod@gmail.com with any guest suggestions or topics you'd like us to delve into. Today's guest is Jess Smith. She is a little person and committee member for the Little People of New Zealand organisation. Let's get into the discussion. Hi Jess, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. I really appreciate how much time you've taken to come and hang out with us.
Oh, thank you, Hannah. I'm really excited to be here.
In your capacity as a committee member for the Little People of New Zealand organisation, what do you perceive to be the most pressing challenges and opportunities for little people in New Zealand today within media?
I'm on the committee for the Little People of New Zealand organisation. Currently my role is membership secretary, but previously I was our media liaison. Have had some kind of experience in that role and still am guiding the person who's currently in the role around some stuff as well. I was thinking about this earlier, and I think the biggest thing is representation. But I think that representation branches out into more things than just what we're seeing on the screen, right? But for me, I think, and I know we're going to discuss this later, oftentimes if we do see little people on screen, it's often for entertainment purposes. You can see that they've been cast in roles for the comedic aspect of it or the fantasy aspect of it or whatever it is, but it's intended to make the audience either laugh or portrayed in a way that can sometimes give this really false reality that little people or dwarves are these mythical creatures that don't exist, and if they do exist, that they all look a certain way or all male with beards and whatever. And so I think that's the biggest issue, is the representation, but then that translates right into how we're then viewed in society. So if people have this image of us being there for their entertainment or not even being real at all, then when they see us in public, they often assume that while they're seeing this mythical creature, or they need to really steer and understand what's going on. Oh, this person is solely here for my entertainment purposes. What jokes can I make? And so I think that it's not just about media. I think in this day and age, we just see how much media can influence on people. And so that's why the representation angle of media is so important, because it really influences on our daily lives.
That's very informative. And speaking of representation, directly into the next question, Tiptoes is a film that has garnered varied reactions from audiences. From your personal and advocacy perspective, how would you critique its portrayal of little people and the narratives it chooses to foreground their representations?
Yeah, Tiptoes. I only heard about this film this year, and I can't remember what year it was made now, but it was a while ago, and it's one of those films that's on Netflix or Disney Plus or Neon, so it's actually really hard to track down. Just to be really transparent, I haven't seen the full film. I've seen bits of it on YouTube that I was able to find after I found out about it, and honestly, it makes me laugh, but it's one of those situations where if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And from what I understand, just for those listening who might not have heard of it before, the premise is that there is two average height people, and they are going to have a baby, but that average height male doesn't want to have a baby because his brother is a little person, and he's scared that it will pass down into his child, and he's ashamed of his family. All his family are little people except him. He doesn't have any contact with them. His wife didn't even know they were little people, and she falls pregnant, and he has to tell her that he thinks this baby could be a little person and how horrible that would be, and actually his family are little people. And from what I understand, the wife ends up actually getting to know the family and actually having a really close relationship with his brother. And I think they end up together in the end. But the crazy thing to me is if you are going to do a film around that, and I guess that's a thing of being ashamed of family members with disability and how do you work through that, like, totally a thing. And if you're going to do a film like that, just do it properly. So one of the biggest things that grinds my gears about that film is that there is actually no genetic link for that male, average height male, to pass on his brother's dwarfism. That's not how it works. The person with dwarfism can pass it down, but absolutely no way can that brother pass it down. If he was to have a child with dwarfism, that would be a completely random event. And so that's the first thing, is like, how can you not just like get the basic research to know that's not even a plausible possibility? But yeah, and so I think that's the main thing I would take away from that film, is just being able to tell stories like that, but in a way where you've done the research, you've consulted with people, and you're actually portraying them right. And I think, from what I understand at the end, potentially they have shown these little people in a great light. But yeah, just do your research.
Yeah, but at what cost?
Yeah, exactly.
The happy ending always comes at a cost. It does remind me of the whole like inspiration subgenre of disability films. It's just like, cool, you can have a happy disabled person, but at what cost to the other aspects of their characterization? Like when you mentioned If I Don't Laugh I'll Cry, that was me watching Rain Man the other day because I love to torture myself. It's very fun. And just the jokes that were made at like the autistic person's expense, the non-autistic person like verbally abusing and like physically grabbing the autistic person to get them to shut up, basically. And it's just like, if I don't go, look at that, isn't this funny? And then what does that say when you see an actual disabled person in real life? No one's going to come up to me and be like, do you like trains? No one's going to do that in real life. And it's because my disability is invisible, but for someone that may have a visible disability, there's like these stereotypes that keep getting perpetuated over and over, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
It's that cost. Representation at what cost? Obviously not with consultancy, clearly, because it's a whole other situation when people make films about disabled people and not having the consultancy behind it. So, transitioning to Hugh Grant's role in Wonka, which is a bit more of a recent example. The trailer's only just come out like in the last month or so we haven't seen the full film, but based on what you've seen, and especially the online discourse around it, how would you evaluate his portrayal in the context of representation and inclusivity? So are there any aspects of the characterization that resonate or diverge from the lived experience of the little person community based on that trailer?
Shockingly, we don't all walk around singing Oompa Loompa and eating chocolate all the time. Shockingly. I think, again, this is such a interesting one, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka, that whole franchise has been around for a long time, and I loved that movie when I grew up. It literally did not even occur to me how terrible the Oompa Loompa situation was, because I just loved it as a good kids movie. I think as I've gotten older, and I know that there's also an aspect to the Oompa Loompas that has to do with race as well, and obviously as a white woman I won't be commenting on that, but I think the way that they can literally offend so many people with one character is crazy. And the Oompa Loompas, I think, I have been called an Oompa Loompa by random strangers or whatever, and I think it's about that representation again, right? And I think they had such a cool opportunity to redo that this time and to have a different portrayal of the story where they hired little people actors for one, and they used this new twist on Willy Wonka to give them proper roles. They're not slaves, or they're not mythical, weird little creatures. They are people. And the fact that they not only continue to portray Oompa Loompas as these, I try to remember the trailer now, and pretty sure it's like he's dancing in a jar and then playing the flute or whatever. The fact that they are just continuing with that absurd storyline, but then also that they got one of the most well-known actors of Hugh Grant, who I do like Hugh Grant. I have nothing against Hugh Grant up until recently. And they've used CGI to make him into a little person, and it's one, really disturbing to look at, and two, it just takes away from so many people who probably struggle to get into the industry. And that's a hard thing as well, right? Is like when all the roles are these difficult, entertainment focused, comedic value roles, it's really hard to get a good feeling out of being an actor in that position. But then when they just completely go over your head anyway and CGI famous actors, it's just disappointing. And I think they just missed a really cool opportunity to actually do something better and to have a better story be told. And I watched the trailer. It's not a remake of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's completely different. And there was totally a chance for them there to do better. And I'm all for having little people actors taking on roles if people have auditioned for those roles. That's their personal choice, and I'm like, good on them, go for it, because you've got to get into your career somehow, right? But yeah, just for them to be overlooked and for them to continue writing such an absurd storyline, disappointing to see in 2023.
Yeah, it's crazy. If you were to take the CGI version of Hugh Grant and then you were to compare it to Cats the musical, which would be the worst CGI horror, you couldn't compare because they're both disgusting in their own rights. So considering the evolution of storytelling and representation in cinema, how do you interpret the portrayal of the characters and the themes in the new Snow White movie, the trailer of it, especially in relation to the historical and cultural context of the original tale? So how does this, in your opinion, modern rendition align or deviate from the lived experiences and expectations of the little person community?
Again, it's a similar story, isn't it? We are not all men with beards who go to work together each day and hi-ho, off we go, or whatever it is. But it's more than that, again. And look how much opportunity there is this year for little people actors, right? Like, we could have had a great little Snow White rendition and a Willy Wonka rendition with great storylines and uplifting, empowering little people actors. It could have been great. But alas, here we are faced with another CGI rendition. And again, Snow White, even more so than Willy Wonka, has been a fairy tale that's been around for decades. And I'm not going to come in here and be like, we should cancel Snow White. What little girl doesn't love princess? Probably many little girls, but most girls love little princess themes. They love Snow White. They love Cinderella. And there's problem. We can poke holes in anything, right? Like, it's so easy to critique things. I think my thing with Snow White is the mythical aspect that fairy tale creates of dwarves not being real. And we see that in things like Game of Thrones, or I want to say Lord of the Rings, but I feel like that's more hobbits, but same. And when we are faced with that, when we're shown that these people are mythical characters, it leaves little people open to being bullied or targeted or thought of as those people. And I think when we're looking at the new Snow White coming out, it was just another missed opportunity, really, of being able to create a more empowering storyline of these little people actors being able to play these roles. But it's a live action remake. They've cast a beautiful Snow White, and then they've used CGI for the dwarves, which I think just adds to that mythical thing, right? Like, we've seen great portrayals of little people before, like Warwick Davies in Harry Potter. Yes, that's a mythical creature, but it was never meant to be comedic or anything like that. And he was a great actor. And I just think, why can't we have more roles like that where little people actors are being recognized, being put into empowering, cool storylines? Obviously, there's going to be some element of myth and magic and those sorts of things. We've seen that in a lot. It's a genre, right? But if we have an average height Daniel Radcliffe playing a wizard that can, whatever he can do, wave his magic wand, then I'm pretty sure we can have little people actors playing magical, mythical roles too, but let's just actually give them that chance.
Mass media often claims to tell stories, quote unquote, about specific communities. So in your view, what are the ethical responsibilities of filmmakers and actors when representing communities that they may not be inherently a part of?
Yeah, so I think we touched on this briefly earlier, right? It's that consultation. And so I think when you're telling any story, there should be consultation. And we see that, right? We've had stars recreate movies about someone's life and they've interviewed those people and they've spent time with those people. Firstly, I think if an actor isn't a little person, then they shouldn't be portraying a little person in a movie. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
I think filmmakers have a responsibility to actively hire little people to play roles of little people, but also to play roles that aren't specifically little people as well. I'm just going to throw that in there too, but why can't Harry Potter be a little person without it being a goblin? I don't know why I'm referring to Harry Potter so much. I don't know why, but it's just a movie that everyone knows. And why can't a little person be able to play normal roles as well without just being cast in roles? I think besides that, there should always be consultation if it is going to be like an animated thing, or if potentially they just couldn't get a little person actor at the time and they are going down the route of CGI. I think consultation is still super duper important. I think research, like Tiptoes, researching what is dwarfism, how does that look, like, how does it look, how does it present in different people? Not all of us are the same. What are the things that come with dwarfism that isn't just the height aspect? Like many of us will have joint issues, pain management issues, a lot of those sorts of things, mobility issues. Why are we not talking about those either? So yeah, I guess consultation, research, learning, and just prioritizing putting little people in those roles and in other roles.
Imagine deciding to make a film and being like, we're going to go down this route, and then just not even bothering to talk to the community that you're trying to represent. It's like,
yeah, and we've seen that disability in general, people who've played people in wheelchairs or whatever, no consultation there. We've seen it across the rainbow community of actors playing trans people or playing gay people who haven't actually had that lived experience and haven't consulted on it. Yeah, I think it's a real issue.
Yeah, it does give me very big ugly energy thinking about Archie in the wheelchair. And then after all the backlash happened with an able-bodied person in the wheelchair there was this absolute chaos of a show that was called the Glee Project, and it was like people would audition to be on the actual show itself, and then they brought in a person with a wheelchair. Her name is Ali Stroker. She's the only visibly disabled person to win a Tony Award, which is like the musical theatre equivalent of Oscars. So she's done that. Well, it was after Glee, but oh my gosh, it was so funny. There's an episode of Glee where the two people that are in wheelchairs sing I'm Still Standing by Elton John to each other as a duet, and it's just like, are you kidding me? Is that supposed to be funny? It's funny in an ironic way. It's literally, if I don't laugh, I'll cry. It's so painful. So, given your extensive voluntary advocacy work, can you recommend any specific initiatives or campaigns that have been particularly impactful in challenging or reshaping societal perceptions of little people that you would recommend to the listeners?
Yeah, so I think that in New Zealand, obviously, we're a really small organisation. So as I mentioned before, I'm on the committee for Little People of New Zealand, and a lot of our work focuses around the advocacy and the support that we can offer families and people with dwarfism. And our scope isn't big enough to take on larger projects, but if you look overseas, they definitely have a lot going on. I follow someone on Instagram whose name is Aubrey Smalls, and he is currently fundraising to make a movie called Dear Average Height People, and that is going to tell the stories of little people across the ages and hopefully portray to average height people exactly why we shouldn't be viewed as entertainment value. There's a lot of books out there, some of them aimed at children, and I think that is always, that's not even a campaign, that's just something that you can do in your own home, is raising children to accept and respect diversity. I see it all the time. Obviously, I'm shorter. I oftentimes am the same height as children out in public, and they might get pretty excited by that. They're like, oh my gosh, there's this woman who's got a phone and keys, like she's driving a car, but she's my height, like what is going on? And the parents that actually explain it to them or say, why don't you go say hi or ask a question? Like, those are my favourite parents. It's the parents that pull kids away and go, don't look, don't stare. It's like you're missing an opportunity to actually educate. Yeah, that's not even a campaign. That's just like common sense, I think. And then, like I said, there's definitely books. I think we're in an age of social media, right? So there's people you can follow on social media that are great advocates for the little people community, but also just like disability in general. I think just, again, do your research and consider supporting organisations like Little People of New Zealand to be able to strengthen our scope. And yeah, I guess just being aware, right? And being able to see a little person in a movie and know whether you think that's a good portrayal of them or not, if it's purely there for comedic value. And yeah, just think about it.
Yay! That's all the questions I had for you, Jess. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Unless you have any further questions for me or anything you want to say, you can plug your socials, you can say hi to the listeners.
Feel free to find me on Instagram. It's jessica.smith with 4 S's in the Jessica, because shockingly it's a common name. But I will often be sharing resources and creators that I follow around disability and dwarfism. And I think I'm going to make an assumption here that many of our listeners would be New Zealand based. And one thing I can definitely say is I think we have a culture here in New Zealand that is a little bit further behind than the rest of the world in terms of recognizing and accepting diversity sometimes. So I recently went traveling overseas for a month, and the whole time I was gone, I didn't notice it at the time, but when someone asked me about it, I reflected on it and I went, oh my God, I was never stared at, never asked weird questions or had weird comments made to me, like nothing. And then I had a friend who went traveling in Canada recently and she had the same experience. And I think now, if I went a day in Wellington without having someone stare at me or say something to me, I would be concerned that something had happened and I was suddenly tall. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's that education and recognition of diversity that I really encourage.
Yeah, I totally agree about the culture in New Zealand. Since I spent a year away in Idaho at the University of Idaho, plug for University of Idaho. But they had this amazing academic / friendship program thing called the Raven Scholars Program. And shout out to them because I've never had anything like it, where it was 30, like equivalent to like full class size of just autistic people. And if someone vented about their special interest, then if I started talking to musicals about people, they'd be like, oh my gosh, no way, tell me more. And I'd say to one of my friends, oh, what's the latest like TV show you're watching? And then they'd start just info dumping on me. It's really fun. And then to come back here and like, I know that New Zealand is like rugby, and like if you're a special interest in rugby, that's great, but if it's not, then I'm just like pain. But it's really crazy that I'll just talk to people about musicals and they'll be like, please stop.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it is, right? I think the biggest things that we can take from this episode that we've just recorded would be that representation, the consultation. I just love that they rhyme. And education. There you go.
What is this, a poetry class?
Representation. I know, representation, consultation, and education.
Put that that's on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, merch. Merch plug. and then yeah, shop down below in the bio. What is this TikTok? If there's nothing else, then
no.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Jess.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Seeing Me on the Screen. We hope you found our discussion insightful and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify for more engaging discussions about female disability in movies, TV shows, theatre and beyond. Remember that your voice matters. Email us at seeingmeonthescreenpod@gmail.com with any guest or topic suggestions. Thank you again for listening to Seeing Me on the Screen. Until next time, let's keep sharing untold stories and work towards a world where everyone can see themselves represented on the screen.